What's up, metalheads? Thanks for clicking on my channel. And yeah, I figured now would be as good of a time as any to just rank every single Metalocalypse character because why not? I'm always down to give it some love. It's one of the few shows that is just sort of ingrained in my brain. And especially with bands I've played with, we always will quote it, and it's very relatable if you've ever been in a band. So figured have some fun, talk about all these different characters, and yeah, let's get into it. So coming up first is Dick Magic Ears Nubbler. I had to make sure I put in the magic ears because I don't want to get demonetized right away, but I'm going to put him up in B tier. You know, he's a character that is funny, but I don't think he could carry an entire episode on his own, and I feel like he's used well in the show where he's just kind of there to be the voice of reason when he's dealing with, you know, these idiots and trying to get them to buckle down. I do like every once in a while when he kind of loses his shit and starts to kind of be a bit of a control freak. So yeah, not one of my favorites, but a good character. All right, coming up next you have Abigail, who I want to put her in C, bordering on D tier, and I don't think it's her fault. It's just that when she's introduced, she's a pretty cool character. I mean, she's introduced late in the series and season 4, and when you first meet her, she is not impressed at all with Murderface or Nathan or any of the guys in the band, and being the new producer, she's not afraid to call them out, and I really like that part of her character, and if they'd stuck with that, she could have been higher up on the list. But then very quickly she just kind of becomes the love interest for Nathan and Pickles to fight over. She becomes the prize, you know, and I feel like a lot of her agency kind of gets stripped away, and it's not really interesting. I remember visibly rolling my eyes and just being like, okay. So for the potential, she could have been B or maybe even up in A tier if they had had a woman come in and just be like, hey, you're all a bunch of sexist pigs. I don't like you. I'm going to call you out. And then they slowly develop a respect and a working relationship. That could have been really cool, but that probably would have taken a 5th or 6th season of Metalocalypse, and instead of a movie to finish it up, a couple extra seasons. So as is, you know, she's kind of bland, but she had potential. Someone who definitely lived up to their potential and is easily one of the best characters in the series, Charles Foster Oftenson. He's going right up in A tier. He has the patience of a saint dealing with Deathclock, and I love how he's strictly business. I also love how, even though he's polite and well-mannered and slow to anger, he is, as one of my friends once described, someone who he would never fuck with under any circumstances whatsoever. He's also a really great foil to characters like Skwisgaar or Pickles or Nathan or especially Murderface, just to be the straight man in the room and the guy who just has to roll his eyes and just deal with it, the fact that his job is corralling a bunch of idiotic man babies and making billions of dollars. I think that Oftenson is a really great interpretation of some famous rock and metal managers like Sharon Osbourne, Don Arden, Rod Smallwood from Iron Maiden. You know, you have to be that type of character if you're going to be managing these massive bands, because you got to be polite and you got to be down to business, but you also have to have a ruthless streak. And yeah, I think he's a really good character based off of people like that. Coming up next is General Crozier, who, you know, he is sort of bland, but he gets a bit of a redemption arc, and I kind of want to put him in C, but he's kind of like bordering on B, you know, because the fact that he does have a change of heart and he ends up becoming a good guy makes him more interesting. So I'll put him in C, like a light C going up into B. He's interesting, but if you're asking me my favorite characters from this show, yeah, he's not going to be one of the ones that pops in my head. Coming up next is another antagonist turned ally, Edgar Jomfru, and again, like Crozier, I think he's good, but I just can't put him up in B tier. My favorite part from his character is probably his section in the Doomstar Requiem. It's pretty cool seeing all the things he invents, and I do like his redemption arc, but at the same time, you know, look at all the competition he has to deal with, so I'll put him down in C. Coming up next is Facebones, and look, these two guys have a more solid character arc than Facebones, because Facebones is just a cartoon character, but even in a cartoon show, he's a cartoon character. but I still get a big smile on my face every time he pops up, so I'm putting him up in B tier. Nice little homage to Vic Rattlehead and Murray and Eddie, so yeah, Facebones. I also really like how he'll just describe some horrific shit with the most happy-go-lucky voice. One of my favorite jokes is the ticket scalping video that he has, so yeah, Facebones gets up in B tier. And coming up next, we have our first D tier, Senator Stampington. I mean, what is this guy's character? The only thing that I enjoy about him is the fact that Mark Hamill will just say the most ridiculous names in the most deadpan and serious voice. But other than that, I mean, what does he have going for him? He sits there, he tells the Tribunal about what Death Clock is doing, and then that's it. Someone who's really close to S tier material and definitely has a lot of personality and definitely does a lot of cocaine, Dr. Rockso, the rock and roll clown. I'm definitely putting him up in A tier. I'm sure that Charles Oftenson would hate the fact that he's right next to Dr. Rockso, but there you go. I feel like the show uses Rockso the perfect amount because I can understand why some people would get annoyed by him, but he's one of the characters that the second I think of Metalocalypse, Dr. Rockso pops in my head. There was also a good 6 months to a year where I could not listen to Van Halen, early Van Halen, without chuckling because Zaz Blammy Mataz does such a good job of capturing the early Van Halen sound but making it ridiculous. He's also fun to impersonate and just annoy the hell out of your friends with, so Dr. Rockso, the rock and roll clown. As Pickles said, though, he is shit personified. If we were doing this in terms of morality, he would be pretty low on the list. Speaking of another character who's a total asshole, Magnus Hammersmith. Once again, just like with Abigail, he kind of suffers from not really getting as much episodes as he probably should have. We don't really get a sense for what kind of person he is outside of the fact that he's, Dave Mustaine. I love that his last name is an homage to the Hammersmith Odeon in London, where, Motorhead recorded live at Hammersmith, and Iron Maiden had some famous live performances there, but, I don't know. I think I'll put him ahead of the Senator, but he's still down in D tier because he's close to C, but unlike Abigail, I feel like he even has less potential and he's even less developed. Just kind of like there for 2.5 episodes at the end of the series. So, could have been more interesting, but yeah, it's fine. The voice actor does a good job. I just wish they had explored his character more. But now we got one of the core members of the show coming up, William Murderface. Definitely going up in A tier. I'll even put him ahead of Charles Oftenson and Dr. Rockso. I can't quite get him up into S tier, though, and I'll explain why. Look, if we're talking in terms of hilarity, Murderface is one of the funniest characters on the show. He might be the funniest character on the show, but the reason I have him down in A tier instead of S tier is because he's just too good at being a dick. I know he can't help it. It's in his nature, that's just what he has to do, but God, he is up there with Eric Cartman and Uncle Ruckus as one of the most unlikable characters in an animated TV show. I have also played with people who remind me a lot of Murderface, those people in music who have massive egos but no talent and they just kind of drag everyone down, but you got to put up with them for whatever reason. Not only is he unlikable and he's pretty much the cause of all his problems and he basically gets what he deserves in nearly every episode, but he's disgusting too. The fact that I have had to see Murderface naked because I watched this show on DVD and I can never get those images out of my head brings him down a tier. Everything about him is just repugnant, and that makes him funny, but it also just makes me be like, I can't relate to this guy. He's really close to S tier though, just if we're talking comedy, but yeah, Murderface, love him. But God, I would hate to have to meet him. I would hate to have to meet any of the guys in Death Clock because I would probably die a horrific death within 15 minutes. But still, Murderface is particularly egregious. He is just such a dick. One character that I cannot see myself in at all and is an absolutely horrific antagonist and has a good vocal performance by George Fisher, but is also kind of just a bit of a stock character is the Metal Masked Assassin. He's kind of like Crozier, where he's kind of bordering on B, but then he is also just there to be an antagonist. You know, for George Fisher's vocal performance, I'll put him ahead of Crozier. He's not bad, but he's, again, a character that, if you ask me to talk about Metalocalypse, he's not going to be the first person that pops in my head. And other than the fact that he wants revenge for his brother, and he's a serial killer, we don't know too much about him. He's undoubtedly super metal and a terrifying antagonist, but there's not much else that makes him very memorable. He's good, but not great. Okay, going from a character voiced by George Fisher, we go to a character inspired by him, Nathan Explosion. And I have to be honest, Nathan has always been my least favorite member of Deathclock. Not that I hate him, I just don't think he's as funny and interesting as the other four members. I'll still put him in B tier. No, I'll put him in A tier, right next to Rockso, which I'm sure he'd hate. I mean, there's not enough space on that piece of paper to express how much he hates Dr. Rockso. There are some absolutely hilarious moments with him, like the intervention with Dr. Rockso that I alluded to earlier, but unlike Murderface or Toki or Pickles or Skwisgaar, he's kind of the most serious out of the people in Deathclock, and still entertaining, but not quite my favorite. And coming up next, Vatar Orlog, which, aside from looking like Rasputin, which is metal as fuck, I'm just gonna kind of put him in C tier, you know? Once again, like a lot of the villains on the Tribunal, we never really learned much about him other than he's nefarious. Cool character design and great voice acting, and without mentioning any spoilers from the movie, goddamn that last scene, but yeah, just kind of like, okay, he's there, you know? I think Metalocalypse was always at its best when it was focusing on the band and satirizing music culture, celebrity culture, heavy metal culture, but the Tribunal stuff was always kind of like, okay, this is a thing that's going to happen, but yeah, so Vatar Orlog, C tier. But with that out of the way, we get to our first S tier, because Pickles the drummer belongs up at the top. He is easily one of the best characters in the show. I think he also has the best family dynamic in the show, and we really get a sense of why he is the way he is. And he's also absolutely hilarious, while also being one of the more serious characters, one of the characters that is usually more level-headed, you know, except for when he isn't and he completely goes crazy. He's probably the best musician in Deathclock. His singing voice is incredible, which, yes, I know that's Brendan Small's singing voice when he's not doing the Nathan Explosion bit. He can play guitar, but what gets him up into S tier for me is his relationship with his family. His relationship with Seth is one of the funniest relationships in any cartoon. It's also a relationship I can relate to on a deeply personal level. Maybe not a brother, but people who I know in my life. I think everyone has someone like that in their life who is just a distant family member who shows up when they just need some money, and they're an absolute scumbag, but you have to just kind of grit your teeth and deal with them. And I think Pickles is also the center of what could be probably the best episode of Metalocalypse, Rehab Clock. There's also so many funny jokes with him and Snakes and Barrels and his resentment when they get sober or when they have a reunion without him. So yeah, Pickles up in S tier is an easy choice. It's a no-brainer. Okay, and we have Cardinal Ravenwood, who will forever be known as the guy who died the most brutal death in the series and had his intestines pulled out through his eyes in the very last episode of season 1. I mean, that's his most memorable moment, right? That's I don't know. I'll put him down in C tier, because apart from his absolutely brutal death and the scene where he talks to Crozier about how he's having dreams where he thinks he's going to be killed by Salacia, there's not much else to him. Although there is a really funny joke early on in season 1 where they're talking about how Deathclock summoned a troll, and he's going, oh, God will strike down this creature, and the expert is saying, yeah, God is not going to be able to stop this, and he's just like, you dare to challenge God? And the guy's like, shh, 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 shh. Just like with the rest of the Tribunal, they're there, but he does, you know what, I'll put him, well, I was about to say I was going to put him ahead of Vatar Orlog, because he had a more brutal death, but this guy has a pretty brutal death too, so I feel like I'll put him, I'll put him ahead of Abigail, but do I want to put him ahead of John Froome? No, I feel like this all is feeling right. And coming up next, Roy Nicholson, who, if you're going, hey, who's that? He's the head of Crystal Mountain Records, which I love the name Crystal Mountain Records, but I'll just put him down in D tier. Again, he's just kind of there. He's a character who you probably don't even realize because they're in the background a lot of the times. I think he has like 4 appearances. They made him a bit more prominent in the 4th season, but again, you know, not one of those characters that you're going to instantly think of when you think Metalocalypse. You know what? Just for the fact that he died trying to save Deathclock and he signed them, I'm putting him ahead of those 2 knobs. Up next, we have the baby of the band, everyone's favorite character, or at least one of them, Toki Wartooth. He goes right up next to Pickles. Toki's a character that I think, like Pickles, is very relatable. And I think maybe I see a bit of myself in him because he's so happy-go-lucky and childlike until he isn't and he snaps. He also gets frustrated because he feels like he's not taken seriously because he is so naturally nice, which is a pretty funny character trait. Just like with Pickles as well, one of the best episodes of the series is focusing on Toki. The episode in Season 3 where he gets a girlfriend through a dating agency and he kind of learns that he is maybe a bit more shallow than he thought he was. And even though he's, you know, kind of nice and happy-go-lucky and normally doesn't want to pick a fight with anybody, Toki is the most metal member of Deathclock by far. I don't remember any of the other members of the band beating someone to death with their bare hands in front of thousands of people. Pretty much every single person who's been to a metal concert has had that moment where there's just some drunk asshole getting way too close and way too loud, all up in your personal space, and yeah, Toki beating that guy to death in that episode is very cathartic for anyone who's had that experience before. Murderface backing down and just deciding to be like, "What's up, bro? What's happening?" It's probably the smartest thing he ever did in his life, too. So, Toki Wartooth, he's not just hilarious, he's not just likable, he's not just brutal and metal. He also makes Murderface be a better person and smarten up a bit. So, yeah, Toki, right up there with Pickles, is one of the best characters in the series. Now we getting to the way more gooders guitarist, the fastest in the world, Skwisgaar Squigelf. And this is probably going to piss Skwisgaar off a lot, but he's going to be just beneath Toki. He's top of A tier. He's not quite up there in S tier. It's pretty brutal. I'm sure he would hate it, but Skwisgaar's really close to S tier, but just not quite for me. He's one of the funniest characters. I feel like we also do get a sense of why he is the way he is when you look at his relationship with his mother, and he's one of the ones that is a bit more fleshed out, but I just don't quite like him the way I do Pickles and Toki. I guess I don't see as much of myself in him. Maybe I'm just, wow, you know what? Maybe I'm a narcissist because my 2 favorite characters are the ones who I relate to the most. So maybe I should put him up higher because maybe I have more in common with Skwisgaar than I thought. I'm a bit of a narcissistic asshole, but yeah, Skwisgaar's hilarious, but I just can't quite put him up there on the same level as Toki and Pickles. Dr. John Twinkletits, I feel comfortable putting him in B tier, just beneath Nubbler, but ahead of Facebones. He's not really used too much, but the few episodes where he's actually in, he's really funny. Coming up next, we have Seth, who is probably the biggest douchebag in the entire series. I love the way he interacts with Pickles. It's so funny. You get a lot of an idea of who he is as a person just from a few appearances. And as I said before when I was talking about Pickles, I think that a lot of people have someone like this in their family or friend group who, you just eventually have to cut out of your life because they're just such scumbags. Maybe they're not an ex-con, but they are that type of person who just shows up when they need money from you and you never hear from them other than that when you're at your lowest. But yeah, I'll put Seth in B tier. You know, that feels like a good spot for him. I think I'll put him ahead of John Twinkletits. Kind of want to put him ahead of Nubbler, but I can't do that because Nubbler has more appearances. But yeah, there's Seth. Okay, up next, and we have the head of the Church of the Death Clock, the Army of the Doomstar. Look, I forget this dude's name. Down in D tier. He pretty much exists just to be like, you are the chosen ones. The Metalocalypse is starting. Go do this. Which the chosen one lines does give Murderface one of the funniest jokes in the 4th season of the show. But yeah, I can't even remember his name, and he just kind of exists. The voice actor is great. I think it's Werner Herzog. I forget who the voice actor is. A really famous actor who does a good job, but yeah, he's just kind of a stock character to be a wise old man who dies, and that's it. And the main antagonist, kind of the opposite of him, is Salacia, who I'm honestly feeling D tier for him too. I don't know. Maybe I'll put him ahead of all the other D tiers because he is a demonic entity and he's way more intimidating and his character design is super memorable. But he just kind of sits there and he goes, "No, let Death Clock do their thing," and then that's pretty much his character until later on in the series and the movie. But yeah, I mean, I'd be lying if I said like, "Oh no, I love him so much." No, I don't. So there you go. That's me ranking every single character in Metalocalypse. Happy April Fools. Was this list pretty's metal or am I a dildo? Let me know in the comments below. This is also the point where I do a little bit of self-promotion. I have an instrumental song out called Waking Giant. There's a link down below if you want to check that out. I think if you like Death Clock's music, you'll probably like that song as well, so it's there if you're curious. Also, don't be a dick, be a dude. Hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, all that YouTube stuff. If you enjoyed this video, there's probably something else popping up right now that you might also like. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you at the next video.